I really think that most central banks view it as an asset, a crypto asset. And so I think there's a narrative in the community that central banks are pushing back on it. I really don't think they are. If I look at all the utterances, I think Mark Carney has said on the record, it's a crypto asset. Jerome Powell has said on the record, it's like digital gold, it's like an asset.
Yeah, he sees it as a store of value.
A store of value. The deputy governor of the Chinese central bank has said it's an asset. Christina Lagarde of the EU central bank has said, yeah, it's an asset. I mean, they might say it's a speculative asset, but currency is a medium of exchange, and it's the province of governments. And in order to be a currency, you have to be deemed non-taxable upon transfer. And Bitcoin is not. Bitcoin is deemed property by the IRS, and most countries deem it as property, which makes it an asset, not a currency. So I think that the way the world is evolving, we're going to see 5 billion or more people with mobile phones and mobile wallets. And in that wallet is going to be a selection of currencies and a selection of assets. And the strongest currency is the dollar. And the strongest asset is Bitcoin. And in countries like Venezuela, they're going to lose their currency privileges, and their citizens are going to default to the dollar as a medium of exchange. But the only way that you can deploy dollars as a medium of exchange to billions of people across hundreds of countries and tens of thousands of banking systems or application networks is if you have a global settlement network, which is a shared monetary protocol, and that is Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is the global monetary network that allows everybody on Earth to store their economic energy over long periods of time. And it also allows everyone to synchronize those mobile wallets in Zimbabwe and Venezuela and Nigeria and India and Argentina and the US and China and the like. And so I see an emerging economy with a digital asset called Bitcoin and a digital currency, likely the dollar, but if not the dollar, perhaps the renminbi, right? And if not the Chinese currency, then perhaps the euro. At the end of the day, the winner is going to be the strongest currency, which will come from the strongest country and the strongest economic network, which will be the US. And the winning asset will be the strongest crypto asset with the greatest security and the greatest acceptance and the most stability, and that will be Bitcoin.
So is it wrong then to be calling them cryptocurrencies?
Yes, it is wrong. Most sophisticated people that have studied it realize they're crypto assets. Bitcoin is a crypto asset. It's not a cryptocurrency. It's a tragic misnomer. And because people call it a cryptocurrency, then it lends itself to a shallow criticism that it's not good as a currency because the central banks will ban it and because the tax treatment is poor and because the transaction rate is low. But again, those are all red herrings. It's not a currency, nor does it need to be a currency, right? Anybody thinking about it for even a few seconds realizes that if there's a taxable event every time I transfer it to you, it can't be a currency. So right. So no, it's not a currency. It's an asset. And if you think of it as an asset, it's very helpful because then you realize it's not competing with the dollar and the euro. It's competing with gold and silver. It's competing with bearer instruments, and to a certain degree, it's competing with bonds as a store of value, and it's competing with ETFs like the S&P 500 index as a store of value. And once you understand it that way, then you're not so afraid anymore because you understand the regulatory framework that comes to Bitcoin is the same regulatory framework that comes to gold, silver, and S&P 500 indexes. It's just know your customer, anti-money laundering regulations. And if you're afraid to buy Bitcoin because you're afraid of regulation, you shouldn't be, because if it is regulated pari passu or at parity with these other assets, it will create it'll create a avalanche of institutional money flow into the asset class because it'll simply normalize the treatment in the Western world. The IRS in 2014 deemed it to be property.
Right. But
And as property, it means that when you transfer it, you owe a capital gains tax. So there is like zero chance the IRS is going to reverse that. It is property. It's not a currency.
And if you don't report it, it's a felony. This is the problem I think I wanted to touch on a little bit, is that I think you see a lot of these crypto billionaires on, and millionaires on YouTube and other places where buying flashy cars and so forth. And if they're using their crypto in order to buy those things and they're not reporting it to the IRS, that's a huge mistake.
Yeah, it's not very wise to transfer Bitcoin to pay for anything. I mean, if you were to say to me, I can pay you in Bitcoin, it doesn't make a lot of sense because the transactions are slow. But if I had highly appreciated Bitcoin, I would be accelerating a shorter or long-term capital gains bill in order to pay you. And so the only way that I would pay you in Bitcoin would be I would take $100, I would buy Bitcoin, and then 1 minute later, I would transfer the Bitcoin to you so that the basis in the Bitcoin is equal at the time I acquired it and the time that I transferred it. So I think that this is a vestige from the first decade when there are a lot of retail users of Bitcoin and before they understood the law. But the law has been very clear in the U.S. since 2014. And any institution, right, any high net worth individual, any corporation, any institutional investor understands that you acquire this stuff, you're going to hold it. Now, I'll make one more point. It doesn't make any sense to pay for anything in Bitcoin for two reasons. The first reason is because it's a taxable event. Mm-hmm. And you're a fool to accelerate taxes on your own person by a decade. The second reason it doesn't make sense is because it's a long duration asset that's deflationary, which means it's likely to go up in value. It's been going up 150 to 200% a year every year for a decade. So why would you pay $1 million in Bitcoin to buy something which is going to depreciate in value when the $1 million in Bitcoin may very well double 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more times, right? So it's a long-term investment asset. A much wiser course of action would be to borrow money against Bitcoin. If you have an appreciating asset, never sell it, finance it. And if the asset's appreciating at 20% a year, and if the interest rate is 5%, then it's pretty obvious what you ought to do is keep the asset, pay 5% interest, because the tax bill on money that's borrowed is zero. So you could live off of your borrowings against your appreciating asset for the rest of your life, without ever paying the asset back, without ever paying the loan back, and without ever paying any income tax, and without ever paying any capital gains tax in the U.S. Other tax regimes may be different, but in the U.S. right now, that would be the treatment.
And I hope my audience is paying attention, because that's exactly, the brilliance of you and what we try to teach here on the channel about. That's why I'm a long-term buy and hold real estate investor, because you're not paying the taxes on the debt. And that's how you can build wealth appropriately and using it that way. So don't be just selling your Bitcoin and buying Ferraris with it. Don't be a knucklehead with it.
If you desperately need a Ferrari, you're better off to borrow the money against the Bitcoin. Like you can be rich with a Ferrari, a yacht, and a jet. You need to have borrowed the money against a tangible asset, which is going up in value as the money supply expands, in order to keep and pay for the Ferrari, the yacht, and the jet.
Exactly. Are there any alternative coins, any altcoins that you invest in or you're bullish on when you look at, I don't look at any of these that are out there right now? You're looking at Cardano or Ethereum. Are you just strictly?
No, they're all ventures, right? Bitcoin's the dominant crypto asset. Ethereum is the dominant crypto application. You can divide the entire universe into some segments, And Ethereum is competing with Binance Smart Chain and Solana. That's very competitive. They're very complicated. They're very centralized, much more centralized than Bitcoin. They have to be centralized because they need to run on proof of stake networks because they need the speed.